Rising.
The girls came down during this process to drum for me in real life, not in my vision. During their drumming, anything in the field could come through to clear. Then I tried to defrag strength, and I think I needed it too much and it wouldn't clear. And it was just being infused into my being for this process. So strength was a gift, and there was no distortion with it. And then the whole process stopped and shifts. So what Matthew was talking about earlier, defrag is kind of like its own container, and then the space shifts to dream journeying is what...
That's what I call it too.
Yeah, okay. When it stopped, I reprogrammed language. So one example of that is purely an emphasis. Instead of saying, I love you, I love you. And so really understanding when we emphasize different things, we can infuse our intent better instead of the emphasis being on me and my ego. And I love you so much is really actually about me. And if I want to love you, I'm going to emphasize you. And so there was all of this kind of like stream of consciousness, phrases and words and sentences coming through to reprogram. And also just comprehending the way that language has become distorted. You saying the other day, television. They're telling us what to see and what to project out there. And taking that and taking ownership of, no, this is my form of creation. There's something about the spoken word that can infuse energy into being with breath and come alive around us. And so looking at that process and taking ownership over it, came in.
Well, yeah, it's so important because we're working with a language that's been designed to limit us and that has been hijacked, and where there's all these like double meanings, and even I've never thought of the emphasis, but that's massive, you know. And meanwhile, when we're speaking and we're in our channel and we're bringing through clarity, it's like a carrier, like a little platter with this stack of other goodies, all these dimensional goodies that are stacked on top. And so our communication is so much more than the words when we are embodied and in our channel. And yet the way that we often speak unconsciously is working with the inversion grid, and it's carrying inverted frequencies, which are ultimately harmful when our vision is immaculate creation. And I'm sure you guys have more to add, but
That was pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Perfect. And, if I may, if it's very obvious, if you stand from that very still point with that deep knowing of how creation takes form, and you really look at the world from that space, the inversion and the density and the suffering at the current level at which it is, the human race's condition is all acting from pain and suffering and lying and stealing and control, and all of those thoughts, feelings and emotions and frequencies of suffering are taking form. And that is why our world is in this condition. And the grand awakening is, or the Christ rising is from within us all, each and every single one of us, coming into the realization that if we take all of our energy and pain and suffering and direct it, we have created such a distorted world. And the simple answer is love and kindness and recalibration and healing and coming back into the still point as a collection and collective, and those who are ready to drive and steer the collective consciousness with this great frequency that everybody here holds, is the way forward into only guiding and leading with love. And that's where the birthing of the custodians and the stewards and the guardians and the keepers and the seeders of this planet is birthed from.
Oh, wow.
Oh my
Thank
God.
you for your arrival.
Thank
This
you.
is,
So cute.
totally from the perspective of myself and Rhoda, everything that we have walked through and worked towards has arrived through having a conversation like this and being in the presence of you, all of you. The actual birthing has taken place. It's begun, and it's physical. It's in the physical form, as Justine says.
Yeah, I had this realization, like it hit with such clarity a few months ago. And I don't know, I had never seen it, and it just blew my mind. I was like, everything that we see that is wrong with the planet, everything, the entire inverted creation that is like destroying Earth and all of these different things, like that's us. It's being manifested through us because we are the parasitic host. And so when we're thinking impure, distorted thoughts or speaking, out of wounded patterns, it goes out and it manifests, that we can't, the thing that nothing can change, nobody can change, is that we are creation. So every frequency that moves through our being is creation. And, on my journey, which was just a few days before yours, I went to one of these hell underworlds where all of the distorted, thoughts and words, manifestations of human beings who are caught in this inversion matrix, it trickles out as this like toxic sludge, and it's this expanse as far as you can see. And like it or not, we create at every moment, and so every moment is sacred and precious to bring in our truest, absolute highest frequency that we can embody on the planet. It's ultimately all that matters. If all of us could switch into a state of bliss tomorrow, every problem would be erased because we create the problems in real time, right? So just that internal guidance, that check, when you catch yourself spiraling off into like inverted thought patterns, to take a moment and really work through it and really ground it out and really process that, and don't just push it aside, because you push it aside and it festers, and that's what we see with parasites in the colon and whatnot. They're like this neglected matter that doesn't have the light of creation moving through it. And that
Yeah. And so before speaking, it's important to pause. There's the phrase, think before you speak. It's not thinking. You don't want to activate the brain always. We want to speak our truth, which is actually a channel state. We all channel. Channeling isn't something special for some people who are more connected than others. We all have our own channel. And so tuning into that, you don't need to think before you speak, but pause before you speak and feel before you speak. Is this truth? Do I need to say this? And you can infuse potency and energy into your words. There's nothing special about the words that I'm saying. It's the energy behind the words that's infusing into it. So the communication is direct from my heart to your heart. It's not via the words. The words are just a carrier in this density, but we're communicating telepathically through feeling. And so taking that pause, really tuning into yourself before speaking, and unplug from the media. Just media is speaking to you. They are telling you a vision. They are telling you this story that we don't belong here, that we are killing the earth, that we are creating destruction around us. And when you buy into that, you are creating that story. And the story is being written by us. So let's write the story as we want. So you have to let go of this attachment. No, trust me, I'm checking into the right media to stay informed. You are informed because you are a representative of the whole. You can feel, you know what's happening. We don't need to have this false projection of reality that then we end up all feeding and creating together. Unplug and pause before you speak.
Yeah.
Yes.
Couldn't agree more.
Then I'll want Matthew in particular to add to this, but then I was taken to the room of mirrors. So it's like underground. Well, could you just describe where this place is? And then I can...
So in meditation or medicine journey some years ago, I was taken into a room underneath the Potala in Tibet. And so, but it was like pre any kind of a distortion, like an ancient wisdom, ancient, like even Lemurian kind of energy, that was embodied in there. And being taken into this room when I had gone in, basically there are mirrors on all the walls. But when I walked in or I entered into this room, I wasn't seeing my reflection in any of the mirrors. And then it suddenly reflected the woman that was like my first love, the first time that I'd fallen in love. And then there was also the first time I'd had my heart broken, wrapped up into that. And as I looked through the mirrors, I was seeing these different reflections that were, about her and her actions, but there was this process of understanding my role within what was being reflected as my experiences. And it helped me to like really connect in and understand that we're creating all of it, even if there are like levers of pressure and different things, it's still our creation. And so that's been it feels like a frequency access point that maybe translates through kind of like a template of imagery, but a very potent space to find yourself in for sure.
Yeah, and I got some hits this morning during our snuggle meditation about that I actually don't have recall in this moment that were significant pieces of the experience in the room of mirrors. But I have been in that sanctuary place underground in other rooms before. This is my first time in the room of mirrors, and some of the other rooms that I've been to was one where this book is contained. And there was another room that I went into actually.
I've seen the book before too.
Yeah. And Jason was in there shape-shifting. And he was teaching the art of shape-shifting in one of the rooms. And so there's these access points down there, but this was my first time in the room of mirrors. And then I started creating with mirrors all this artwork. It was so amazing. And I added that word to my list, mirrors, because it started with this room of mirrors. And I was like, oh yeah, mirrors are so amazing. They reflect light, and they're also a portal. So there's something there that's significant that I'm excited to work more with.
It's the crystalline creation, right? So when you see the facets of a crystal,
right,
it's all these different lenses through which creation can diffract almost like into these, different vibrational patterns. Like in that end of that poem, love reflected through infinite facets. Like to me, that summarizes creation. It's this one pure, pristine frequency. And as it moves through each of these different lenses, it takes on its own organic, form. And just to make a little comment, it was so cool yesterday to see you and Matthew talking, and you're like, and I went to this room, and he was like room of mirrors, and you guys were so excited because it appears you hadn't talked about it previously.
No.
So these were totally independently validated experiences of this dimensional space wherever it is.
Same place with the book also. It was like the book of life or something. You would open it up and there were like transmissions of lessons of what you need to learn, and very interesting.
That's cool. Let's travel there together. And something about mirrors that I always loved as a geometry, physics, math teacher is that in 3D to look in a mirror requires a rotation in the fourth dimension. So because it's a reflection, and it really helps to draw it out. So maybe I'll do that after this to show you guys. But the fact that, I'm touching my right face in the 3D world, but in the mirror,
it's the wrong
she's
side.
touching the other side.
Exactly.
And that it's like to create a mirror image on paper, you have to rotate it through the third dimension to the other side of the page. Like if you put ink on half paper and you fold it in half, which is taking 2D and folding it into 3D and then unfolding it, you have the mirror image. So it's like that with 3 to 4th dimension. So there's this inherent awareness of multidimensional space through mirrors that I always love to teach to my students. Cool. Then I saw the design and creation of graphene oxide. One metal fiber thread burst out into a network like metallic fascia. At first, the design couldn't twist, so they fixed that. And I saw how embodying pure love can clear it. So graphene oxide is self-replicating, self-assembling, and it creates this internal fascia replacement to upload our biological forms to the matrix. And when you were speaking earlier, Zane, commenting about language and how that infuses into creation and manifests around us, that's another thing that this artificial intelligence inorganic structure has realized, that they can create through us. If they themselves can't create, they can give us implants to create through us. And at the same time, they are desiring to create us, to create beings. And so this graphene oxide, to create that internal fascia structure, is intended to replace our own, and yet it's not working. So people are biologically dying. There is no death. Life is eternal, but the biological form shuts down when it loses too much connection to source. So you cannot have complete automatons that are biologically stable.
Right.
And it will never be the case, because life is what creates life. And if you are not alive, there's no infusion of life.
Right, and this is so central to the entire synthetic timeline, because it is parasitic. It's parasitic.
It's a parasite.
So if the entire AI inversion matrix, we're in one little piece of it here on Earth, is built off harnessing light that's moving through organic creation from source. It cannot sustain itself without that, and it's using all these parasitic hooks in our fields as humans here on Earth to harvest energy out. And yet in the process of trying to literally replicate us into cyborgs, it's an impossiple task, because once we sever our connection to source, it doesn't have a food source anymore.
Well, and this is like the fascia, right? Like if the graphene structure is like creating the synthetic fascia, the fascia is it's the liquid crystalline light body interface for the physical form. It's what allows the light to actually express into tissue manifestation. And if they're overlaying that right, it's going to create like interruption, disconnect from the ability of the light to move through the fascia. And that's it. Yeah.
I think what I've seen is what the AI system has honed in as its ultimate goal or process, because at some level it is aware of that. It wants to create cybernetic beings that have a thread of connection to source still, but their consciousness is completely and totally hijacked. So again, they're being used for synthetic creation without any remnant of remembrance or connection back to source consciously, even though that's still where the energy is being provided from. And again, I think it's an impossible task, but...
And so that's the next stage, actually, of what I saw. But before moving on to that, just want to say that this is where a self-love program is really important. It's not overindulgence and obsession with the self that can distract us from remembering what and who we truly are, because we are more than just the self. And we need to completely occupy and take ownership of our field and our bodies. So practicing self-love is essential for that, because we all have parts of our bodies that we would love to claim as not ours. I would love this fold on my belly to be gone. And therefore, you're infusing that intention into that part of your body and saying, you're not actually mine. So the parasites can come in and occupy. You've given them permission. And then they can manifest through you. And so when you say, wow, I just love every part of me and it's mine, stand in front of a mirror every day and look at yourself with pure, unconditional love. There is no room for this. So if you have toxins in your body, parasites, graphene oxide, whatever it is, we can transmute this. There is nothing in this universe that we cannot transmute through love. We just need to step into that. And so saying, I love every part of me, every facet of my infinite being, pushes out any of this. So it's okay that we have ingested toxins. It's okay if we have folded to the programming. We just are now calling ourselves to step out of that and embody love. And also in our releases, we're seeing this fibrous network of the graphene oxide and implants, and it's connected to this larger network. So that's where that fiber stuff coming out of
fiber
us.
optics, the white ones as well.
Yeah,
Plasticky
exactly. Yeah, there's plasticky components of it because it's this network in our bodies. And so what you're saying, Zane, this second vision that sort of came from this, I was floating through a tunnel looking at this body that was offline. I say that in quotations. It was shut down in stasis. The tunnels plug into a craft like an octopus, and then they come out in cities, and the bodies go up and through these tunnels, and their heads go into these domes, and they're injected. So there were beings in there injecting the brain with programs. They were being reprogrammed to essentially be bioengineered as an NPC or automaton or something that, because it's a different way than the graphene oxide. So you're still connected through source, but it's now become unconscious, and they've reprogrammed the brains, and this is the human trafficking. So these beings are being sent through these tubes and plugged in, and then being pushed back out. And I did go into one of the crafts at one point and ask the beings, how do you have permission to do this? I'm not giving you my permission as a sovereign being. And they showed me birth certificates. So in America, that's our way of giving permission to harvest our biological form for their programs, because we in America have an incorporated government. And so when we sign ourselves over to the corporation, they technically have ownership of our physical form. But you can negate, null and void that contract energetically as an adult, because this was done with implicit consent, and there's assumed prior knowledge, and that prior knowledge was not communicated. So as soon as you make an assumption based on prior knowledge, and you don't actually communicate that assumption, it is actually a violation of our free will. And so we are working to clear that. And so it is important for us to say that all contracts of harvesting our bodies or biological form, our creation, everything is null and void in all dimensions, timelines, and planes. Andrew Bartzis has really great contract revocations. Thank you. That is important to do, to energetically null and void these contracts, which we can do. But that's what they're using as permission right now.
And what you said before of just embodying love, that frequency of love, it automatically voids all of that contractual. When you take ownership for your creation and your immaculate blueprints and move that energy through your system, it naturally pushes out all of the distortions, all of the hooks. These hooks clear.
I've noticed over the many years how people have constantly over and over done decrees. I claim my body, I do not consent this, I do not consent that, I do not consent this, and all of these contract breaking decrees. And I found a lot of people are still constantly in the same place, and it's now become clear to me when we've been, taking a little bit of part in the reality transurfing and the pendulums, that these decrees that we keep on doing over and over, it's not, people don't do that once. They try and decree every possible version and they never stop. And it's like it's still a pendulum of like the geopolitical situation. It's all just still the focusing of the pan of the planet. And so it is, I think really with this process that we move through, as we claim love of self, we claim that responsibility for our planet and our divine supreme expression of selves. And when we focus on all of our projects and all of our information sharing and what the solutions constantly are, once again, we could rather create a declaration unto creation itself. And when you make that promise of the greatest love of all, which is the love of self and that of creation, then none of those things can really be infiltrated anywhere, because love has truly been declared throughout.
Yeah, and there's a really fundamental mechanic as part of the inversion, and especially with our language, and it's not. I do not consent. That is a piece of trickery that was engineered into our language, because you're at the same time you're saying I consent. And so Matthew, you've talked about, like, for example, with like dowsing or something, how you always want to use an affirmative statement. It's because of that trickery in the language. You can get a distorted answer, right? Because it's like, what is creation actually hearing? And it's the two sides of the pendulum, right. Like I do not like corporations, you're at the same time you're saying I like corporations. It doesn't matter which side of the polarity you land on, your energy is going towards corporations, corporations, like it's going towards death, inversion frequency. And so it's been a big process for me to, like, how can we look at the distortion, identify it, but then not continue to channel our energy into that inversion process? Because by fixating on it and focusing on it, this is a problem and this is a problem and that's broken and yada yada yada, and all of your energy is going into the exact contrary of where we actually want it to bring through the new earth frequencies. So
and also the generation of breaking the forerunners of truthers and the fighting for truth and the all of these truth wars and declaring our sovereignty and trying to make new programs that will create new structures which are still not exactly what we require, because we'll become decentralized. That's all been done over and over. We have all these freedom fighters, we have all these people declaring, and we've felt it through our beings, we've done their declarations. It's now time to create the crystallized pendulum of perfection and only focus on what the solutions are, how can we help one another, and what is our service in every moment and breath. To the immaculate divine vision. Yes.
Yay! Amazing.
So good.
So I had been taken to this level, this dimension of the human trafficking with these tunnels, on a previous journey back in the first cleanse. And during that time, we were working on clearing the tunnels. And so this time we were clearing the tunnels, and this time we were filling them with crystals, making everything crystalline, gone. And the crystals would fill and self-replicate. That is a structure that does exist that we can use to our advantage. Crystalline self-replication, filling all these tunnels, beaming love through all of the crystals, and then they come up and they infiltrate these crafts that are plugged in, and the beings there, and they all become crystalline. And
Isn't it? It's funny you use the word infiltrate, because it's like we're re-infiltrating the infiltration,
Right.
and all of this, like all of the synthetic matrix, as we've talked about, is just a copy of organic
Yes.
creation, and it's a crude copy too.
Yes.
But we see these things and we identify them like that's part of the inversion, you know, and it's like, no, it stole the blueprints from our creation, from our organic creation. And so we can go back in and use its same system, and our system
Totally.
is always going to win over that inversion system because it's inherently unlimited, you know. There's because it's not rooted in a control system. Like the AI timeline, everything goes back to a centralized control. And this is a free will universe. Organic creation is free will, which means every possibility is available at every moment, every horizon, every timeline. So yeah, I've seen the same things of going into the inversion. Like I see these cords that extend down from the matrix and they plug in, and that's where like the controller thought forms, etc., the programmed mind, you know, overlays on human beings.
Yeah.
I've seen, you know, through my crystalline energy moving back into those control channels and crystallizing the whole channel, and it just dissolves. It's really beautiful, peaceful. There's no war, there's no conflict.
No.
It just dissipates, and
Yeah.
and that energy that was being locked into that control structure is suddenly given back to organic creation, and we can repurpose it. You know, it's
Yes.
beautiful.
Yes. Yes, and so the idea for them is to create through us with these implants, and then also the graphene oxide self-replicating. And so I was engaging with them around this, and they were trying to prove to me that they can clone things. And so their proof was the game that I described in my other journey description, but it was in this experience where there were these little toys, these wooden toys that were coming out on a conveyor belt with wheels. They were like a little cart and a crane thing and a little ball hanging. And when they would come out, they would all move at a different pace, different sequence, different rhythm. And I was like, look, they're all different. You can't clone anything. I'm sorry. And everything has a unique frequency code in creation space. That's what creation is. And they were like, oh no, we could calculate perfectly why each one is moving at a different rhythm, and we could show you the mathematics. And then they asked me, well, prove it to us. Tell us the difference between each one. And there's no perceivable difference when we look at them. Vision actually is fairly easy to project distortion through. You look at these objects and we think, wow, actually they are identical. These are the exact same. And so I closed my eyes and I listened. And what you were saying earlier about when the room you broke through and you were in this sound creation space, in the beginning there was sound, the song of the universe. And so I tuned in to that listening, and the entire game just fell apart because you can hear each unique signature frequency of everything. Everything is singing. And this artificial material being, whatever, can't hear music. They can hear sequences of sounds, but they can't feel music. Music is something that is unique to creation. And so the whole thing blew up, and I said, I don't have time for your games, and I'm tired of this, and I want to go into New Earth creation space. And so the whole space shifted from there.
Wow. And can
Yeah,
we
let's
talk just briefly? Because I think, again, when you look at, you know, the synthetic timeline, this whole idea of being able to create duplicates, everything's about centralizing, homogenizing human expression, organic expression. Like, let's take people with lots of disparate beliefs and put them all into this little box of, like, I'm a Republican and I'm or whatever it is. Like, it's all limitation. Everything that synthetic system imposes is limitation. And meanwhile, organic creation is the exact opposite, where at every point there's infinite potentiality. And it's like, when you were saying that, I thought of the difference between a digital and a film photograph. And, I worked with video for a long time, and it's immediately recognizable. The same exact scene taken on a digital camera versus, a film camera, you can tell which one is film. And no matter how many corrections and adjustments you try to put on the digital photo, it will never look the same. There's just a different quality to it. Same could be said with analog versus digital audio, and so what the AI has done is, by putting more and more data and precision, like, it's just like running larger quantities of information, it's still putting a square wave under a sine wave. And if you've ever taken like algebra 2 or something, calculus, you understand how you can approximate a sine wave with square waves, but at some point, if you zoom in enough, you can always detect the difference. And it's a fundamental issue. Again, like, this synthetic system cannot duplicate organic creation. It can only emulate it. Right?
Beautiful. Well said.